August 20th, 1968, Soviet tanks invade the capital of Czechoslovakia. It's the end of the Prague Spring. 20 years before Gorbachev, Alexander Dubček had attempted a democratization of the communist regime. He had removed the old Stalinists, weakened censorship, legalized the opposition. But Brezhnev's tanks put a sudden end to the reforms. Stupefied, Czechoslovakia wakes up to find itself under Soviet domination. 5 months later, January 15th, as the resistance movement is faltering, an unknown 21-year-old philosophy student named Jan Palach decides to act. That night, he talks with his older brother, Jiří, for the last time. We saw each other the night before at our uncle's funeral, and none of us noticed anything, absolutely nothing. Četatí, 20 kilometers north of Prague. Jan Palach leaves home without saying anything. Arriving in Prague, he goes up to the statue of Saint Wenceslas, holding an oil can. He douses himself and lights a match. There is a sudden blaze. It's 3 p.m., January 16th, 1969. A tram ticket controller saw everything, and he tells the story. All at once I saw a flame. I thought it was a car burning. A man was running, covered with flames from head to toe. I thought it was an accident. So the man was running like this, and he was screaming, "Throw a coat over me." The first thing that I could think of was to take my coat off. He was running here and there. He was going in that direction. And right here, just about here, he collapsed. He fell down. I was still waiting for the right moment to throw my coat over him. And then he turned over as he fell down, and I did throw my coat right over him. At 3:10 p.m., Spirek, the ticket controller, stops an ambulance. Still conscious, Jan Palach is rushed to the service of Dr. Vrabek, specialist in third-degree burns at Karlova na Městě Hospital, just off Wenceslas Square. He lapses into a coma during the night and then regains consciousness the next day, the morning of January 17th. Professor Vrabek charts his progress. This morning, his condition has improved a little. We've been able to re-establish contact. He collaborates very well with the personnel, but his condition is still very serious.
The extent of his burns were more than 80% of body surface, and also complications with his lungs. But he was conscious. He was till the end of his life speaking and with the connection of people who were treated him.
This film was made on January 19, 1969. In the bed is Jan Palach. These images have never been shown before. For 20 years, the cameraman, Vladimir Tuma, had hidden the film that he secretly shot. Today, he has nothing to fear from the secret police, and he's allowed us to use this document. It was when I got to the station that I learned how my brother had been hurt, just what he had done. In the hall of the train station, there was a news bulletin on the radio announcing that a philosophy student at the university had doused himself with gasoline on Wenceslas Square to protest against the occupation, and that he had lit himself on fire. He was identified only by his initials IP, but right away we knew that it was him.
au début de l'année 69, il y a eu un affaiblissement considerable de la position de Dubček.
By the beginning of 1969, Dubček's position had weakened considerably, as had that of the resistance front. It's at that moment that radical groups wondered what measures to take to fight this turn of events. And one of these measures was the courageous and tragic action taken by Jan Palach.
He was very curious to know if there is a publication of his letter which he left, and if it was really published in the newspapers. He asked us to bring him newspapers to be able to read it and to see it. But he didn't believe, you know. He wanted to see it by himself. In the last day, we allowed to be visited by his colleagues from the faculty, because we all were afraid that more young people will burn themselves.
The communist government panicked, fearing an epidemic of human torches. Vladimir Spikarsky was a journalist on national radio at the time. He received the order to investigate the student population. In the letter which Palach left, there was an appeal that the people did not really understand. In this letter, Palach wrote that if his demands were not met, the people should start an indefinite strike. At the time, no one understood what Palach meant by that. It was only in November 1989 that the people went on an indefinite strike, thus linking Palach's time with the present. What had Jan Palach wanted to do? Commit suicide? Imitate the bons who were setting themselves on fire in Vietnam at the time? Dr. Kmunikova sat up with him in his hospital room for 3 days and 3 nights.
In this type of case, it's extremely rare to be so lucid, to have such clear ideas. At no time, and this was the characteristic of his personality, did he talk about himself, about his private life. The second or third day, he knew he was going to die. He never said a word about it. He didn't regret a thing, but his battle was very much on his mind.
Alarmed, the government asked psychiatrist Milan Cherny to do some tests to see if Palach was unbalanced, disturbed, a madman. If I must talk about Jan Palach from a psychiatric point of view, I have to say he was sane, he was not unbalanced. He did an act that went beyond the ordinary. Normally we talk about extraordinary acts such as these as something abnormal, psychopathic. But in this precise case, it was not that at all. Jan Palach was not a psychopath or suicidal. He did not want to die. He wanted to wake up the people. After 3 days of suffering, Jan Palach died. We went with Luboš Holeček, the leader of the student movement, to the national radio station to prepare a program in which he was to broadcast Jan Palach's wish, made just before he died, that no one else sacrifice their life. Palach is not heeded, and several days later, another student, Ian Zajik, sets himself on fire, soon followed by 16 other people. People talked at his funeral. Mainly questions and political perspectives, which everyone talked about at the time. After this tragedy, we decided on what we were going to say to the journalists. We told them that no one had imagined that my brother could commit such an act. But I am convinced he had premeditated it for several days, that it was on his mind. In fact, I'm sure of it. On Saturday, January 25th, 1969, 800,000 people followed Jan Palach's funeral procession. The police were not present. The movement was relaunched, the second Prague Spring. But it was to last only a few weeks during the 1969 winter, because very quickly the Soviet boot came crashing down again. 5 months later, on October 15th, Dubček was driven out of office. To his dying breath, Jan Palach tried to get his message across. Dr. Kmunikova recorded his last words, an extraordinary document that had been hidden up to now. Here it is.
Tohle to si uděláte, to už úplně stačí, aby o tom věděl celý svět.
No, nebuďme neskromní. No, prostě nesmíme si o sobě moc myslet.
Co říkáš?
Který právě může. Člověk musí bojovat proti tomu zlu, na který právě stačí. Tento zřejmě ještě tak nejde.
20 years later, in 1989, dissident Václav Havel became president of Czechoslovakia, his first gesture rendering homage to Jan Palach. A year ago, day for day, I went with my friends to put a bouquet of flowers at the base of the statue of Saint Wenceslas, in order to celebrate the anniversary of Jan Palach's great sacrifice. Several days later, I was arrested. A week later, I learned in prison that a huge solidarity movement had started. In 1969, an anonymous student, a chess lover, decided to sacrifice himself for his ideals. Today, at Wenceslas Square in Prague, candles burn night and day in his memory. He had started a fire that smoldered for 20 years and which little by little undermined the foundations of totalitarianism, which has now collapsed.